Welcome back to 101 East. Now, the average Asian person eats about 90 kilos of rice a year, 20 times more than the average European. And as the Asian population increases, so must production. But is growing genetically modified crops the solution? And does GM really increase yield? Chan Tao Cho has been to the island of Mindoro in the Philippines and spoke to a farmer there, struggling to come to grips with the increasing sophistication of his trade.
Agriculture is big business. The playing field includes the presence of big corporations with the know-how to genetically modify crops for greater yields, like US company Monsanto. In 2004, Thomas Datinguinoo was tempted to try planting BT corn, which is genetically modified to be pest-resistant. He took up a loan from a Monsanto representative. The yield improved, but other problems emerged.
Sinunod ko naman. Ay, ang problema nga ay napakadami ng gastos niya.
I followed all the instructions on how to farm BT corn, but the production cost was very high. In the end, I didn't earn more money.
Makakapagpaaluan sa magbubukid.
Saddled with debt, Thomas Datinguinoo reverted to planting the traditional corn variety. Till today, the harvest earnings are still going to the creditor, who pays him a daily rate of about $6. The arrangement will continue till the last harvest of this year. For Eli Vargas, an agriculturist, one main concern is that many genetically modified crops are patented by big corporations, and they control basic supplies like seeds and fertilizers.
GMO is a business, and as a business, it will not help the farmers in any way. They should be partners in development, and you can only do that through sustainable agriculture.
Eli Vargas believes that existing organic methods are sufficient for farmers. One of them is by releasing a breed of wasp called Trichogramma into the fields to get rid of pests.
We are trying to introduce to the farmers the making of organic fertilizer using rice bran, chicken dung, and pig waste.
Public organizations like the International Rice Research Institute, or IRI, provide farmers with improved crop varieties without extra costs. But the increasing level of sophistication in agriculture is not something all farmers can handle. Also, IRI does not have the rights to all the patents for products from the big corporations. So depending on what crops the farmers wish to grow, they may still depend on these companies for their needs.
Farmers are businessmen. The corporations you refer to are businesses. They only survive by producing products that people are willing to buy from them on an ongoing basis. So if a company has the wrong business model, it won't stay in business.
But for people like Thomas Datinguinoo and his family, just one failed experiment became an expensive lesson that they're still paying for.
In the studio with us are Daniel Ocampo from Greenpeace in the Philippines and Duncan McIntosh, a spokesman for the International Rice Research Institute. Daniel, let me start with you. As we heard there, farming is a business at heart, and a lot of farmers, like the one we saw there, will look to alternatives to increase their yield, to make themselves better farmers, if you like. Genetic modified seed is one avenue for this. Why should we deny them that potential?
Genetic modified seeds or genetically modified crops are not the only options. And for us, it's not even an option to promote farmers' welfare. A lot of seeds and crops are actually being developed conventionally that can actually produce higher yields, and a lot of farming methods are there and are available but are not getting enough government support.
It's about choice. It's about, for farmers who want to be organic, that they have the knowledge and the varieties that will grow organic. For the farmers who want to do conventional agriculture, that they have the choice. And for the farmers who are more comfortable with science and new technologies, that they also have the choice to grow safe, reliable varieties. It's choice.
Which is basically why GM is not needed. A lot of these crops were developed to address a particular pest. And for corn, for example, you have more than 22 kinds of pests. But the BT corn is just addressing the need to control the corn borer, which you can actually control through natural means.
Well, let's focus on the aspect of business here and go back to a point we mentioned earlier on, that is the experience in the United States, because they have gone the furthest down the road of investigating not only the biology but the business side of it. And the experience in the US with the involvement of business in the biology has been a good one or a bad one?
In the US, it's a good one for the businessmen, it's very bad for the farmers.
So let me say again, just to correct, obviously GM for farmers in the US has been very successful. It's very widely adopted, soya beans, cotton, and to say it's been a bad thing for American farmers, you just have to look at how many farmers are using the technology to see obviously it's a very good thing. Now, on the point of corporations patenting agriculture and crop varieties, this has already been going on for many, many years, decades, in the area of hybrids. And for many cases, again, in the US and in Australia and other developed countries, it's been a very successful thing that farmers have invested in. But I think the key point here is really to talk about you cannot take what happens in America and apply it to the poor farmers of the developing world.
Is
you
that
have to
true?
be very careful doing that.
Is that true?
Farmers are farmers everywhere. They suffer from government approaches to agriculture. When you say that a lot of farmers in the US have adopted GM technology because it's been good to them, I think it's mostly because it's not good to them, but because of contamination. They have no choice. You have contaminated seed supplies in the US.
Well, Duncan says it's been very good for farmers in the States. Can you disprove that?
I cited farmer cases.
Some farmers certainly have had a bad experience, but
Yeah.
overall it's a fairly big industry. Clearly it's being fairly successful.
That is also getting a lot of subsidies from the government.
It's a sort of sovereignty issue of each country's government to decide on this issue. And they all do that knowing full well the fundamental importance of the rice farmers in each country. Rice is not the same as maize or corn. It will not be handled in the same way.
But I think what Duncan failed to answer was why separate rice from other GM crops in terms of contamination? Contamination will happen eventually, and patents will still be owned by companies, and companies can always sue farmers in the end.
Scientifically, it's quite straightforward. Rice is an asexual crop. The chances of cross-pollination compared to other crops is greatly reduced because it produces asexually.
But scientists will also say that there's a 5% chance of cross-pollinating with other crops or other rice in the same area. And I could cite a specific example of rice contamination that has happened, LL62 in the US.
Let's not get into the minutiae of the science here for a second. What I want to know is, are you convinced by Duncan's assurances that the big corporations are not out there to take over the individual farmer and to oppress the individual farmer? Why not?
They're out there to control our food supply. That's a basic premise of developing GM crops.
Isn't this just conspiracy theory, though? I mean,
it's a fact. It's a fact that research on GM wheat has slowed down or has completely stopped because of rejection in Europe, for example. But with rice, they're getting a free hand in terms of people's lack of access to information in Asia and people's need for the basic food supply instead of having other concerns such as science and GM.
At the end of the day, Duncan, we still haven't really answered the question. If there is a limited amount of money and time and expertise in the field of agriculture, why is it not being put towards making what we have better rather than inventing new areas?
I think, on behalf of Erie and the public sector, I can say yes, because 90% of our budget at Erie, and I know pretty much in the public agricultural research community in Asia, is still on conventional. Only about 10% of our budget is on GM, and a lesser proportion of that is on golden rice. So we still have 90% of our budget doing exactly the work that you're talking about.
Is it not more in Greenpeace's interest rather than outright contradicting everything that has to do with genetic modification, making sure that the education is there at all levels, not only for the individual farmer, as we saw in the film, but at government levels, and making sure that the whole process is managed efficiently and effectively, rather than simply trying to deny it's happening?
What we do mostly is to look at researches that are going on as well in terms of GM crops. And we have a pool of people who are actually reviewing all these applications. But what's really happening is that these companies' interests are towards controlling food supply and seed supply, not actually promoting farmers' welfare.
All right, gentlemen, then we'll have to leave it. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
My thanks to my guests, Daniel Ocampo and Duncan McIntosh. And from all of us here at 101 East in Kuala Lumpur, I'm Teymoor Nabili. Goodbye.